And now, the star of the show, Jordan Rogozinski.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Jordan411 Sports Show. Today's guest is a writer for The Athletic. He reports on hockey news and specifically Winnipeg Jets news. Please welcome Murat Ates to the show. Welcome, Murat.
Jordan, thank you so kindly. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. How did you get into writing and storytelling?
That's a big question. That's a great question. I think I've been writing my whole life. I used to keep a blog as a teenager. I went to school for environmental science, actually, so not journalism or not writing. But whenever I would do anything that was important to me in life, I would write about it and I would try to publish it if I could. So eventually some travel stories ended up getting published and kind of making it out around the world a little bit. And then also at the same time, I was doing some blogging about hockey analytics with some people who were doing, the guy who coined the term Corsi, Vic Ferrari, I used to write at his blog as well. So I've always been writing in some way, shape, or form.
How do you even write an article? Because I don't know how to write, so how would you even start writing an article?
For me, I mean, it changes depending on what I'm trying to say. So, like right now, we're all talking about the trade deadline, right? So for me, my first question to myself is, what am I trying to say? What is the story about this? And I always try to root every trade deadline piece in how are the Jets doing? How are the Jets doing compared to what maybe we expected? Is it important that they make a trade right now? I think in Winnipeg's case, you can really talk about the trade deadline really well by pointing out how good the forwards are, how good Connor Hellebuck is, and then it's like, okay, there's this need on defense, and maybe we can set the stage for that. So that's something I did this week. I don't know if that helps you in terms of my.
So you basically take what's hot in the news and write your opinions on it.
For sure. And I try to supplement my opinions as much as possible because, I don't know, Jordan, you spend enough time on the internet and everybody has an opinion about everything, right? Yeah. So for me, if I'm really making a case, if I'm trying to say, you know what, David Savard would be a pretty good fit for the Winnipeg Jets or something of that effect, it'll be my opinion, of course it is, but I'll also try to get the analytics going. I'll talk to people who know more about him than I do, and I'll try to really build my case by saying, okay, I think this, these experts think that, here's what the numbers say, and then you can kind of come out of that, and hopefully you can feel informed about how you think.
How many hours does that process take for you?
Too many.
Too many.
It's like every day for my entire life, I have an essay due the next day in school. It's kind of how it feels. But it's good. Like The Athletic, they don't ask us to write 3 stories every single day. They're good and kind about giving us the time to really step into that stuff. So, it takes most days, but it works in a way that I like.
So let's say you start at 9 a.m. and you finish late at night. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, like my day, wake up, check Twitter, check the Athletic. We have a message board on a thing called Slack. Check all my messages. Check in with the press conferences for that morning, whether it's a morning skate or a practice. Do anything that needs to come out of that. Start writing properly by afternoon. Watch the game at night. Keep writing into the night. Go to bed. So it's really kind of a full-time sort of thing.
Good. What is The Athletic?
The Athletic is a sports journalism website where it's kind of like the Netflix of sports. I would describe it to people who don't know, where the idea is you love hockey, football, baseball, basketball, whatever it is, so much that you're willing to pay a few dollars a month for this really high quality product. No ads, none of that stuff, just Pierre LeBrun at the NHL, James Myrtle, Craig Custance, me. And the idea is that there's really good local coverage in every city, but then we have these national guys too. And hopefully that, whether you're in Winnipeg or Vancouver or Toronto, you're still getting really good coverage about the team that you love and all of the other sports too.
What makes the Athletic different from any other newspaper besides the sport?
For me, I mean, I've never worked at another newspaper, so I can't really speak to that. But I'll say, like, when I work at the Athletic, the idea that they give us real time to really sink our teeth into stories, I think that's being trumpeted as really unique, and it feels that way. I get so much support with my stories. If I want to write like a really big takeout feature piece on Blake Wheeler, I have my editor. I have an editor who's dedicated just to feature stories. We'll go back and forth a whole bunch of times. We have a really good support system. So it's not like I have to crank the thing out tomorrow. And I think that helps add to the quality, the amount of support that we get for that.
Yes, for sure it would. Yeah, because the more time you spend, the better it would be.
100%. Yeah, I know that for myself. And, anything that I work on, the first time, okay, whatever level it is, the second time it gets better and better each time that you go at it. So, like, it definitely helps me.
How has COVID-19 affected your job?
Jordan, it was scary at first. I was in Edmonton at the Jets-Oilers game last March, where during the first intermission, we found out that, the NBA had shut down. So we were looking around. Everybody was kind of unsure about how to act. Do we stand near each other? How do we talk to each other? All that sort of stuff. And then the next day we were flying home to find out what the NHL landscape would look like. And at first, of course, we were responding to what had happened. Okay, so what does this mean for the Jets? What's going to happen to the schedule? What's going to happen to concerts at Bell MTS Place? What's going to happen to the staff? But then after a little while, we were all in this sort of holding pattern. We were waiting, like, what comes next? Is there going to be a season? And so it was a big guessing game for a while. I would say that the fact that they were able to have the bubble playoffs and then the 2021 season really gave it a sense of normalcy. But for a while, it was touch and go. It was definitely a tough time in sports journalism for a lot of people.
Yeah. Was there a particular person that you looked up to when you first started in journalism?
Yeah, I mean, so many. We have some great ones in Winnipeg. And I try to, what I really try to do, Jordan, is it's not like there's one person who that's the one that I kind of want to be like. I try to take one thing I like from a lot of people. So I could take, like, Ken Weeb, for example, in Winnipeg is just such a nice person, so professional, so consistent, gets along with everybody. You know what you're getting. Every conversation you have with the guy, it's going to be positive. And, it takes a real special kind of person to be that consistent. So I really admire that about him. There's a writer who was at The Athletic until the pandemic named Sean Gordon, who was writing out of Montreal, who just gets storytelling. Like, you asked me the question earlier, how do I write? And it's like, you know what, compared to a guy like that, I don't know how I write. I asked him that question, and we would always go back and forth. He would tell me about his favorite sports stories. He would know everything about the story, how long it took the journalist to write it, whether it was on a deadline or he had like lots of time or she had lots of time to write it. And just anyone who's that passionate like Sean is, you can learn from somebody like that. And I can go on, I could name so many. We could talk for an hour about all these people.
How do the Winnipeg Jets look to this point to you?
For me, the answer, oh, sorry, did I cut you off?
Like a general idea.
A general idea, they look good. They look good. I started the year wondering, I thought that, there was going to be a lot of competition in Canada. And I thought Calgary would have had, the first full year of Jeff Ward as a coach. I didn't think things would go so far off the rails there that he would get let go. I thought Vancouver would be a stronger team. So I thought that the top 6 in Canada would all be kind of even. But Winnipeg's been able to handle its weaknesses, like defense, I would say. by really playing to its strengths. Its counterattack looks good. Its offensive players look good. Connor Hellebuck looks great. And it seems like whereas every other team has a problem that has kind of sunk them a little bit, Winnipeg's issues haven't sunk them. They've really succeeded at doing the things that they need to do. And now I think that they might realistically add at the trade deadline and be a factor in the playoffs this year in a really competitive way.
Do you think Logan Stanley has contributed to not take as much as a hit for the defense since he entered the lineup?
Yeah, Logan Stanley has been honestly perhaps the most pleasant surprise in my opinion. I remember at training camp and like I've written about Logan Stanley before. I've talked to scouts, I've talked to coaches. Everybody had mixed opinions. You know, he's obviously a really big player. He can move pretty well. He's not a burner in terms of his speed, but he's not that slow. And the question was, how good is he going to be? How good can he get? What's his NHL future going to be like? And I don't think anybody I talked to really thought that he was going to immediately assert himself as a strong third pairing guy in Winnipeg this year. At camp, he looked good though. Like at camp, he'd go into the corner, make his shoulder check so he'd know where everybody was. He'd pick the puck up. He'd make a really clean, quick pass to veteran partners, and then they'd get going. And it was that puck movement I used to wonder about if he could do that at the NHL level. I think he's been pretty good. I think he's been a good spot for them.
What advice would you give me as a up-and-coming broadcaster?
Well, all I can say from here without knowing more is keep doing what you're doing, because the only formula I've ever seen work for anybody is produce quality work for a consistent amount of time and survive until your shot comes. Because my path is unconventional. I didn't go to journalism school. I don't feel like I can tell you how to do it, but I know that you put in a lot of hard work. I know I watched your show. I think the first one I saw was Craig Heisinger was on it, and that's a year and a half maybe. So you're building this portfolio of quality work, and that was the only thing I could recommend to anybody is if you want to do this, and you're doing that.
Yeah. How many drafts do you go back and forth with your editor on? Like, how many times do you go back and forth on your stuff?
It depends on what the story is. So if we get off this call and Winnipeg is traded for David Savard, well, that's an urgent sort of situation, right? Like I've got to write that up as fast as possible, get all the important facts in there. Editor will give that one go. If they have any major questions, they'll ask them, but that's probably just one back and forth, and it'll go up pretty quickly after that. But if it's like about a year ago, this is probably one I worked the hardest on one of the ones that I worked the hardest on in terms of the amount of time. There's this really great family story about a boy who grew up in Winnipeg when the first Jets left. And he has this story where he was just so devastated and heartbroken about the Jets leaving. He wrote a letter to the Winnipeg Free Press that they published. He became a real celebrity at school. But it's his whole family story because his dad was an immigrant from India. They discovered hockey together. They discovered Winnipeg and Canada through hockey. So it's this whole story of how loving the Winnipeg Jets connected this family, like multi-generations. It's a lot there. And that one, you know what, that took me months. And I would say editors and we were probably 3 or 4, 5 or 6, 7 or 8 drafts of that one that went back and forth because we really wanted that to really just sing.
Okay. Well, thanks, Murat, for joining me today. And it was fun learning about the journalism business, and hopefully we can still communicate, and maybe you can help me get a guest in the future. Thank you for coming on.
Right on. Thanks for having me, Jordan.